She's not just an influential policymaker or the head of the IMF. Christine Lagarde is one of the most respected women in the world of finance and business, a global opinion maker and a thought leader. Joins us right here on ET Now for this global exclusive. Thank you very much, Ms. Lagarde, for being with us. And if I may first begin talking to you about global growth. 6 months back, while talking about global growth, you had very categorically stated that you see dark clouds of risks along the horizon. Have your worst fears come true?
I said successively, sun is shining, fix the roof. That was a year ago. 6 months ago, I said exactly that. Watch out, there are clouds on the horizon. There is still time to fix the roof. We're now seeing some of those clouds opening up a bit, and it's not pouring down with rain, but it has begun to drizzle seriously.
And I believe those will be of trade tensions that the world is going through. But also in your opening address here at the IMF in Bali, you quoted Adam Smith to say how natural relations amongst nations are perhaps today the most fertile source of discord and animosity as far as businesses are concerned. You've also urged world leaders to fix and not destroy global trade. How hopeful are you that they will pay heed?
You know, trade, when it works, is a win-win game. And it's also a game which has to include everybody. Topic that we should have paid more attention to and that we should pay attention to now in relation to trade and also in relation to technology. Because it's a win-win game, what I very much hope is that tensions will de-escalate because players will appreciate that it's a win-win game and players will decide to sit around the table to fix the system and not destroy it. That has been my key message. De-escalate, fix, do not break.
But one of the questions, Madam Lagarde, will have to be on multilateralism. Is there a new reality that the world needs to adhere to? Is there a new kind of multilateralism that we need to get used to, that we need to wake up to and espouse world over, whether it's emerging markets or developed economies?
I think there is a new multilateralism in that clearly growth has to be more inclusive, growth has to be sustainable, and there has to be more cooperation. That's my bottom line. More inclusive because if you have a system where by virtue of either trade, technology or policies that favor capital over labor, people feel excluded, disenfranchised, no longer in charge of their own destiny, it is not going to produce a very cohesive or harmonious society. Sustainable because we have one planet.
That's right.
I have a son who is exploring whether there are planets out there in space, but as far as I know, there is one. And we'd better make sure that it is safe for us, but also for our children.
I do want to turn the focus
and cooperation, because those problems will not be fixed solo. It has to require and involve all members.
On that note, I do want to turn focus away from global trade tensions onto what's really happening in emerging markets. And the IMF has been on record to say that capital outflows are the kinds that have not been seen since the last decade. We've already seen that happen. We've seen a carnage of sorts as far as emerging market currencies are concerned, debt levels and all of that. India included, our own currency has been under a lot of pressure. Is this pain here to stay? I mean, is this real now? Is this pain here to stay? How long will this last, given the fact that globally we will see US interest rates rise? We are seeing a dollar strengthening.
Well, first of all, the risk of outflows that you're referring to is not something that is happening. It's a risk that is there.
That's right.
That could materialize, but has not happened. Okay. Number one. Number two, yes, it is a new reality, and we are going to have to collectively cope with it, because when a country like the United States improves because inflation is hitting the target, because unemployment is rock bottom, and because growth is up, clearly there is going to be monetary tightening. Clearly interest rates will impact financing flows and financing cost, and will have an impact on capital flows. So we need to prepare for that, and now is time to do so, which is why I have said steer the boat, do not drift, because measures can be taken. Shock absorbers can be, prepared in order to deal with this new reality.
All right, not too long back, the IMF had called India a sweet spot in the world economy, a bright spot there. we are now seeing some new vulnerabilities come to the fore, whether it's rising crude oil, a higher current account deficit, a very weak currency. These are macro vulnerabilities that are new and that are now coming to the fore. Do we still continue to be that bright spot, or is dullness somehow taking over?
You know, my take is that the Indian growth, the growth of its economy, is still going to be in, you know, the top three. Let's assume if it's not top one. So there is significant growth happening, and there are many ingredients that are supportive of continued growth in India. But it's also an economy that has its vulnerabilities, and the fact that, for instance, you are oil dependent on external supply.
That's right.
And that the oil prices are going up at the moment clearly is a vulnerability that needs to be addressed.
I also have to ask you a question on India's current account deficit, our external trade. It's a structural problem there, and which is why many people wonder whether the steps that have been taken, some import duty hikes, even though we are very WTO compliant, does that run the risk of us being seen as people who are joining the chorus on protectionism? Is that something that concerns you? Is that something that bothers you?
Anything that raises protectionism, that erects barriers to trade, worries me, because I believe that trade has been in the main extremely beneficial. It has lifted lots of people out of poverty. It has reduced the cost of living for many people, particularly the low-income people. It has improved productivity. It has, it has improved innovation, and I think that we need to hang on to those benefits and not begin raising barriers and tariffs.
Okay, the IMF has of course lauded the government as far as the rollout of the GST is concerned and the introduction of the IBC, which is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. But the IMF has also categorically said that India needs labour and land laws to move into the next trajectory of sustainable growth. How hopeful are you that those will happen? Because we are less than a year away from general elections, and those measures are always going to be politically difficult to take.
You know, I think that the government, and particularly Finance Minister Jaitley, have been very determined, decisive and courageous in putting in place the GST in particular. And I hope that we are seeing the benefits that arise from the simplification of taxation as a result of that. I think the bankruptcy law reform was a critical reform too. So I would hope that whether it's now or in the short term, there is a continued momentum to reform those difficult areas, land reform and labour. I share your concern. Pre-election periods are not the best to implement reforms that touch on very sensitive points like ownership and like labour terms.
I can't not talk to you about Gita Gopinath's appointment, not just because she's an Indian, but she's a woman. I'm on all for powerful women right at the top.
And she's a terribly talented economist.
She's an extremely talented economist. How did she make the cut? What turned the tide in her favour?
You know, she is just an impressive human being. She happens to be a woman, and I'm very proud that finally the IMF has a chief economist who is a woman, but she's unbelievably talented. She has multiple interests, resources, intellect that I hope will take the research department and of the IMF and the institution itself into deeper and further directions in order to better serve the membership. And I think she's highly motivated to join us, and we are thrilled that she's coming on January the 3rd.
Madam Lagarde, as a champion of gender, Me Too is a movement that really took off in the US, but those were influential, powerful women talking about it. It seemingly is exploding in India as well, and you've got women from everyday work offices and workplaces now come out and share their horror stories, which obviously brings us to the question that what do corporates and policymakers and organizations need to do to make workplaces places of pride, places that are safe, that are fair for women, because these horror stories about sexual harassment are rather disturbing.
I think you start with eliminating discrimination, promoting women, because the more women there are at the top and in all managerial levels of an institutions, the less of those horror stories there will be. So I would start with these two first and foremost. And I would say that having legal provisions available to fight harassment is also a critical component. India has a legal system in place, respects the rule of law. Well, that rule of law should include anti-harassment provisions.
Does Me Too risk triggering a not her? I mean, that's a concern that some people have raised, that will corporations shy away from hiring more women because they'll be wary of how it's going to play out? I mean, you know, could there be frivolous cases that may come to the fore? So the larger question is, will this lead to corporations being resistant and perhaps reluctant in getting more women on board?
You know, if it was the case, then those companies would lose a lot of talent, would not access and tap into a workforce that is often super qualified, very efficient, and determined to join and to offer contributions. So I really hope that, if only driven by economic benefits, they would not go in that direction.